Thank you very much, Marjorie. It is a
Woohoo.
rare flip for me to be the one in Zoom land and you to be the one there in the sanctuary. And I will also say that it is really such a delight to see everyone here, both in our virtual sanctuary and see you two there together. We're in the Omer period. We're in this moment of time between Passover and Shavuot. We're on this journey together from Egypt to Sinai. And the real nature of this journey is to learn along the way, to look around us and see who our the companions are who are voyaging with us, and to open ourselves up to new lessons and experiences that we never could have imagined before we set off together. So my hope for us all this evening is that as we learn from and with one another, we find ourselves reminded of the holy nature of our community as we are guided by someone who's truly, truly a beloved teacher at Bethel. I invite you to join with me in the blessing for the Omer account for this wonderful mitzvah that we only have this opportunity to perform for another 5 weeks. So I know, right? So if you're familiar with the blessing, please join with me for the commandment to count the Omer. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfirat haomer. Hayom, shisha asar yom, shehem shnei shavuot u'shnei yamim la'omer. Today is day 16, which corresponds to 2 weeks and 2 days of the Omer. May our voyage together be one of uplift, of inspiration, and of help. Marjorie, over to you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you. Hello, everybody. We're really happy to have our longtime Bethel member, Anita Diamant, who will be discussing her important new book called Period, End of Sentence, which will be for sale after her talk. And you also may know she is the author of more than 13 books.
I think you just added a couple there. I don't know where that came from.
It must be 11?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. How did I? Already I'm making mistakes.
No, you made me more important.
Yeah, right. Including her New York Times best-selling book, The Red Tent, which has been published in more than 25 countries. I know I'm correct about that. Yes. Her other novels include The Boston Girl, Day After Night, Good Harbor, and The Last Days of Dogtown. This is my personal favorite. I loved it. And it is also the personal favorite of your daughter, Amelia.
Very good.
Yeah. Anita has also written 6 nonfiction guides to contemporary Jewish life and a collection of essays entitled Pitching My Tent. An award-winning journalist, her work has appeared in the Boston Globe magazine, Parenting, Boston Magazine, Real Simple, Moment Magazine. This is a terrific magazine. I subscribe to Moment. If anybody has not looked at Moment, it's wonderful. And WBUR's online magazine, Cognoscenti. She lives in Boston with her delightful musical husband, Jim, and is the founding president of Mayim Hayim Living Waters Community Mikvah and Education System, which has been operating now for 18 years. Chai, yeah.
How about that?
And I think I heard it now has an art gallery as well.
We've always had an art gallery.
Have you?
Yeah.
All right. I don't remember when I was.
It's in the education center.
Oh, okay. So greetings, Anita. I'd like to discuss what is the meaning of your book's title?
Period, end of sentence. Well, first of all, thanks. It's great to be here and see many familiar and new faces, and hello out there in the atmosphere. Period End of Sentence was inspired by a movie, and that was produced by really a group of high school students in California who learned about menstrual injustice, in particular in India. And they learned about this man who invented a very inexpensive machine to make menstrual products for women who did not have any access to them. So they decided they would raise money for a machine. And because they are a Hollywood high school with connections, they decided to make a film about it. A lot of the parents were in the business. So they actually had a GoFundMe, and they had a bake sale to raise money to make this film, which they did. And it won an Academy Award in 2018, whatever it was.
2018.
18 it was, before, in the before times. And the night, I was watching the Oscars that night, and they announced that it won, and they ran up to the podium, mostly high school students, and the director, who's a very young woman, and she said, "I can't believe a movie about periods just won an Academy Award." And a lot of the women in the audience jumped to their feet, and I got off the couch, and I was very excited too. And I watched the movie the next day. It's on Netflix, and you can still watch it. It's 20 minutes long. And I just thought it was terrific. I'd written a couple of little articles about access to period products in the greater Boston area, and also about some truly horrible stories about women dying as a result of being sequestered during their periods in Nepal. And then I got a phone call about a month later from my agent, who was sitting in her office in New York with the producers of this book. And the name of the film is Period and End of Sentence, because they said on the Academy, a period should end a sentence, not a girl's education. So that's where that comes from. So they called and they asked if I would be interested in doing a kind of a companion book. And I said yes. It didn't take me too long to decide. I needed a project, and it was a subject I was interested in. And that's where the title came from. And the design of the cover is also made by the woman who designed the poster for the film, and very much the same color scheme.
It's gorgeous cover.
Yeah,
It really gets your attention. It's a gorgeous cover.
Yeah. So that's sort of the genesis of where this came from. And I really didn't know a lot about it when I started, I have to say.
Yeah, well, you were quite the anthropologist. That's what my husband said after he read it. He had been an anthropology major, and he said, "She did very good anthropological research work on
Online.
this." Yeah, all online.
This was COVID. This was my COVID project.
Yeah, and telephone calls you had.
Phone calls, books, and online.
Could you explain the term period poverty?
Sure. Period poverty is sort of a subsection of period injustice. Period poverty is people who can't afford the products they need to take care of their menstrual cycles. And that, so the movie is about people in India who are using rags and taking care of themselves, but without any kind of sanitary conditions, no bathrooms. So that's period poverty. But there's period poverty in this zip code too. There are kids who go to school who are worried about having enough products and have to take a math test and are preoccupied all day. So, I think people tend to think of period poverty as something that happens only in poor communities or in the developing world, but it's something that happens all over the world. And it's expensive, those products, if you add it up over the course of a year. And that includes, pads, and includes pain medication, Advil if you have cramps. And it's also just a constant nagging worry if you don't have enough. And so that's part of period poverty. Also, there's something called there's also the fact that period products are taxed in a way that doesn't seem fair. In every state, they decide what to do sales tax for the state and city sales tax. And in some municipalities, they don't tax tobacco products, but they do tax menstrual products. And in other places, it's in Louisiana, they changed this since I wrote this book. There was no there was no tax on Mardi Gras beads, but there was a tax on menstrual products. I believe they've changed that. So it's a moving thing. It's been changing state by state. Michigan recently passed a law mandating period products in all schools, elementary, middle school, and high school. So that's since this was published.
And Brookline is the first municipality
Yep.
in the country to make all period products available.
Right, in all of the public buildings.
Yeah.
And the reason that happened is a high school student who wrote an editorial for her high school newspaper. Somebody on the city council saw it, contacted her, wrote a bill. The student testified before the whatever committee it was, and they voted to put them in the products. And this is really a movement, I think, led by teenagers and young people altogether, who refuse to be quiet about what they understand rightly is an injustice.
Indeed. With your writing of the Red Tent, as well as your current book, there seems to be a recurring theme about menstruation and women's private sphere. Could you elaborate on this?
It was unintentional. It's not like I've been dying all my life to write about menstruation. Also, my Hayim, the mikveh, is traditionally a place women would also go. It's best known for immersion after one's menstrual cycle. So it looks like my career starts with and ends with this preoccupation with menstruation. But in fact, my preoccupation is with women's lives and with untold stories about women's lives. And I've written about that in pretty much all my fiction and also as a journalist. So this fits into that, but it's not like, oh, let's do something else menstrual. This fell into my lap, quite literally, at just the right moment. So I think a lot of people's careers are like that, right? You don't necessarily plan where you're going. You go where the river takes you.
Yes, where the river takes you. It's true. In the book, you examine the historic and toxic religious roots with regard to menstruation. Would you discuss how this is manifested in the Jewish tradition or other religious traditions or in the Hindu tradition?
Oh, that's a big question. Well, in many civilizations around the world and many religious systems around the world, this is about distrusting women, and it's about misogyny, and that the body that bleeds has been considered taboo and unclean and untrusted in a lot of traditions. In Judaism, for many years, well, in the Talmud, women who are menstruating are considered tameh, which means impure. No, it's tahor. I'm sorry, I get this backwards. Right, Janet? Tahor, right. And impure is tameh. And over the history of the writing of the Talmud, the rabbis decided to sort of put a big fence around menstruation so that women could not be approached by their husbands during this period of time, during their period and for several number of days afterwards. And there were laws elaborated around this for many, many years, for many, many generations. Jewish women since the Enlightenment have been pushing back at this. When Jews came to America, there were not so many mikvahs built, which is very interesting. You're supposed to build a mikvah and a cemetery. I think those are the first two things you're supposed to build in a new community. And there weren't so many mikvahs. I think leaving Europe and putting that behind, this was one of the ways that women said, we're going to change things here. Women started taking off their head coverings as well, and it might look like assimilation, and it was, but it was also freedom for them.
Yes.
So, and in the years since, and since the second wave of feminism, a lot of Jewish women have reclaimed mikvah, and even mikvah after menstruation, as something that is in their own control. You don't have to ask a rabbi if you're ready or not ready. And that's what the mikvah in Boston is about. It's about that it belongs to you, and that this ceremony belongs to you, however you choose to observe midah, which is the rubric of menstrual purity and impurity, or just going once a month to celebrate the changes in one's own body. So it's complicated, and every religious tradition has different rules about this. There are some, and civilizations, if you want to get to that, where this is celebrated, and especially when girls start their period, it's celebrated and honored.
Yeah, I was thinking that probably a new ritual would be when a girl has her first menarche, a Jewish girl, that she probably should go to the mikveh.
Well, I have to tell you, 18 years ago, I think, or pretty close to that, someone wrote a ceremony. It has never been used. So I think we're some ways from 12 and 13-year-old girls deciding that this is what they want. A lot of mothers are really keen to do this, but you ask a 12 or a 13-year-old girl if they want to do this, maybe not so much. But I think rather, the sort of folk tradition among Jewish women was that mom gave you a slap when you got your first period, and it could be just a tap on the cheek. It didn't have to be a slap. There is nowhere in Jewish law that's a real folk custom. But rather than even a symbolic slap, flowers, dinner, a family celebration, going out for lunch, special day. There are lots of ways to say, welcome to this part of your life. It's a beautiful part of your life. It's challenging. I will help you. The more we can talk to our daughters and our children who menstruate about this, the better it is for everybody. And so the secrecy and the silence is really what's toxic, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. And all the words, when I was growing up, the curse, on the rag, I didn't hear it that much, but I know it was even different from my mother's generation.
I've talked a lot to younger people, and they never heard it called the curse, which I thought, some of them, not all of them, have heard them called the curse, which I think is, wow, that's terrific. I'm not sure I was taught what that meant, but I certainly knew from the minute it was referred to that way. So things are changing.
Well, the stigma with regard to menstruation is so commonplace that it barely registers. We will use fresh, which implies foul. Sanitary counters the threat of soiled. Carefree responds to distress. Also, feminine erases the presence of trans and non-binary menstruators. Butch lesbians, as well as women who reject the word as archaic and ill-fitting. Can you give other examples of period shaming and slang?
Oh, there's tons. But what you just read from the book, which I recognize,
yes,
is what the aisle in the drugstore is called. So it's like feminine products or sanitary products, and the names of the products are about freshness, and it implies dirtiness, and it's changing. I mean, there's a chain of grocery stores in England, and I believe a chain of drugstores in Australia that just call them period products.
Imagine
that's
that.
what it is. That's what it is. So all of those words have kind of a subtext that there's something clean, and no boys should go down this aisle, right? It's like, shh, don't do this. And if you're a dad buying something for your daughters, you have to just sort of ignore that and realize that that's stupid, and you need to do something for your kid. So that language I find kind of funny also too, because it's not feminine, and it's not pretty. Periods can be painful and very messy, and it's part of life, and it's something that needs to be dealt with, and it's part of a healthy body, for us. And so to sort of pretty it up, and the history of the products is just great. There's one example for Modess, which was a brand way back when, and there was an ad in ladies' magazines, and you cut out a coupon, and you could bring it to the store and give it to the clerk, and you didn't have to say anything. And they would give it to you in they would wrap it in a brown bag, so nobody had to say
Oh, God.
it. Not so long ago.
Well, when I told my husband we were having a fundraiser, to get period products available to women, so 2 nights ago, he went out to the supermarket, And he came back and said, well, Marjorie, I bought some pads too for you to bring in. Good. And I said, good for you. And how did you know what to buy? And he said, well, I didn't, but I just guessed.
Well, whatever he bought, I'm sure will be
Yeah, I said,
useful.
well, this looks fine, sweetie. Good
Yeah,
for you.
good for you.
Good for you.
Yeah.
What part of the book did you have the hardest time writing?
Ooh. Well, the most challenging part, well, there's a lot. I mean, I guess the hardest part was writing about incarcerated people and the incredible shaming and violence done to people who menstruate in prisons. And even when there are laws on the books that say you shall make period products available, that means in some states that you can sell them in the commissary, and they're expensive. And if you can't afford them, and it's a choice between calling your kids and buying these overpriced, inferior products, by the way, it's not what you get in a store. And that there are places where prison guards, blackmailed women for sex in exchange for period products. And we know this from people who have been incarcerated, come out of jail, come out of prison and written about it. These causes have been taken up in state legislatures because most people who are imprisoned are in state institutions, not federal institutions. They're always introduced pretty much by women legislators. One of my favorite stories about this was, I think it was Arizona, and it was put before a committee and it was tabled by the chair. So he got a lot in his mailbox. He got boxes and boxes of period products. So he was so mortified that they took it out of committee, and I believe they passed it. And then, even then, when you pass the law, it's very much up to the wardens in the jail or the prison to make it actually available. And available should mean there's a cupboard that's free, that's got all the products anybody could want, and you can have them whenever you need them, as opposed to, as in one of these prison stories, you get 5 for your month, and if you need more than that, good luck. And if you stain your uniform, you'll get demerits, which means you don't get your 50 cents an hour. So it's this tremendous loop of degradation and shaming. So it should be, like toilet paper. That period products should be as available as toilet paper. We don't walk around carrying toilet paper. You shouldn't have to walk around carrying period products either.
Except the Greek islands, but yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. I haven't been. So.
Well, it was the only time I
Yeah.
had to, yes. Everyone told me to. How can men become part of this conversation? You have a chapter in your book in which starts with a question someone posted online. What is the most ridiculous thing a man ever said to you about menstruation?
With some howlers. One is, what if we've been married for some years and her husband, she said, I got my period, and he said, again? And some of them were really frightening. That one father thought that the fact that his daughter was having her period meant that she'd had sex, that he didn't understand the biology of it, which is true because most of us don't learn about the biology of it in a thorough way. But men can be real heroes, and what's necessary is for men to be models, and that means to be public. So one of my favorite stories in the book is about a cab driver in South Africa who, in South Africa, you have to get to school on your own, so he would be ferrying boys and girls to and from school, and he noticed bloody tissues, whatever, in the back, and he realized that girls didn't have what they needed. So rather than say, no girls in my cab, he put free pads on the dashboard. And when the boys wanted to make a crack, he told them to stop it, that this is just normal and this should happen. He was on TV. I mean, the media found him in South Africa, and he said, they give out condoms everywhere. Why aren't we giving out menstrual pads everywhere? It's part of life. And there are great stories in there about dads who, found out about their daughter's needs, and they ran to the store and figured out, called them back and said, what do you want? And again, in many, actually, I think, indigenous cultures, it was just part of life. And there's a great story in here about a Native American woman who was sent home from school because she was sick. She'd gotten her first period, and her grandfather, who was at home, said, "You're not sick." And she said, "I was told she's not sick." And he said, "I don't know the right song to sing over you, but I'm going to sing over you. This is great." He sent her brothers to the store. They didn't want to go. He said, "You have to go. This is an honor." So that's the total opposite of, again, right? It's that the grandfather knew that this was an important and positive. It means the continuation of the species, the continuation of the tribe. Without menstruation, we don't have the next generation. So men can be heroes. Men are heroes very often.
Well, you mentioned in your book that menstrual justice is a perfect introduction for political activism,
I think so, yeah.
For young women and girls, and gives them a sense of agency and power. Can you think of any other examples?
Oh, there's so many of the, they're very powerful ones, they're very funny ones. I think humor is a great tool to get to punch holes in the stigma. And so one of the best ones was a group of middle school girls are doing this. It's not just, college student and 18-year-old, 17-year-old high school. So these 12 and 13-year-old girls went to the principal in their middle school and said, "We should have period products in the bathrooms." And he said, "No, we can't do that because they would abuse the privilege." That was the language he used. So what did they do? They went home and they baked cookies that looked like tampons with, really very accurate looking ones with strings and a little splash of red frosting, and posted it online. And it was shared a gazillion places, and it got back to him. And guess what? There are period products in the school. And this bunch of girls had, for a brief period of time, a wonderful website called the Revolutionary Girls Baking Society. And it's very funny. And in it, they said, this is not just about, they made the connection to justice more broadly and supporting people who need help in all kinds of ways. It was not just limited to this one action. And I think that in doing so, they learned that they had the ability, especially working in a group, that they could make change. So my hope, and I think we're living in a time of, Malala and Emma and Greta, they're single name heroes of justice heroines, heroes. And so I think this is part of it. And girls realize that, and it often starts with collecting products, because I think if you're 12 or 13 and you got your period and you think about someone who doesn't have what they need, it outrages you, and you think, what can we do? So we collect products. And then I hope the next step is that, why are these so expensive? Why are these not covered by food stamps or SNAP, any of it, or diapers still? And I think they changed it during COVID. I'm not sure that it's going to last. It was a time thing. So I really think that, and you just keep reading. As I get my Google alerts when I was working on this book, I signed up for menstruation Google alerts, so I continue to get them. And stuff is happening all over the world, and a lot of it is another group of college students at another small school in the middle of Iowa starting a project and making sure that, that there are period products in all the bathrooms. So I feel like it's an entry-level introduction to social action in a very, kind of personal way, because you know what it feels like to be, everybody who's had a period has been stuck somewhere without what they needed, and had to whisper and had to and worry about getting the most horrible thing in the world that can happen, which is to get stained and have people see it on you. Oh my God, it's a catastrophe. It should be an accident. It's a catastrophe. So wouldn't it be nice that someday it won't be a catastrophe?
It would be very nice.
It would be very nice. Okay.
I think it's a good time now, because I think Deb Oppenheimer wanted to say a few words about her fundraiser.
Oh, yeah.
So Deb, move my chair.
Are there free products in the bathrooms here?
Yes. There are. Awesome. I saw some. Yeah. There's also a nail pot.
That's good. Yeah.
A nail file?
Well, they should be out in your bathroom at home, even if no one ever uses it. It's a way of showing people, no, this should be out in the bathroom.
I remember people putting them out for bar mitzvahs.
Yes, and weddings, so
weddings,
special
but
occasions,
not
but it should not
necessarily
all
all
the
the time.
time, yeah.
Anyway, thank you for being here. Special thanks to the men who chose to be here. And thank you for everybody who donated products, because we really appreciate it. Many or most of you know that I managed the Sudbury Community Food Pantry for many years. And so I've had a lot of, and I've also volunteered there for 13 years and continuing. So I've met a lot of food insecure people. I have an intellectual sense of what food insecurity is. I've heard many of these clients' stories, but it wasn't until November 2016 that I first heard the term hygiene insecurity. And that was because a gentleman from Hope and Comfort came to the food pantry and we began a partnership. And because of the pantry's partnership with Hope and Comfort, we receive a treasure trove of hygiene products every month, which is great for our clients because even though we were always able to give them some products, now they're able to get more, as well as more selection of type and brand. And then fast forward in my life, about 6 months ago, I also started volunteering at Hope and Comfort. And that's where I read your book, watched the movie, and learned about period poverty and menstrual injustice. And I do recommend the documentary, which is also available on YouTube.
Right.
And there's also a movie on Netflix called The Pad Man. And that's about the Indian gentleman who invented the machine that the documentary was based on. And he invented the machine largely because he discovered sometime years into their marriage that his wife was using rags.
And also he asked her, I love this story, he asked her why she wasn't buying products, and she said, well, it's between that and milk. So that was the choice. The wonderful thing about Mr. Murga, long name with a lot of syllables, he did not patent it. He was asked to patent it, and he didn't patent it so that other people could refine it and make better ones. Wow. And so his machine has been the model for lots of other people to make faster, smaller, better machines. And he also saw it as empowerment for women to make these products, to sell them, to have a micro business. So it was both to take care of themselves and their children. The film also really focuses on education.
Absolutely.
Which is we haven't talked about that yet, but.
That's a really big, that's a big part of it, but heaven knows one of the things that I found at the food pantry is that our male stockers would not stock feminine hygiene products and they would not stock diapers. And I can't tell you why.
They wouldn't put them on the shelf.
They wouldn't put them on the shelf.
They wouldn't touch them?
They wouldn't touch them. So, but in my mind, before I started this research on this journey, I remembered my younger self who lost time from school and lost time from work because I had really bad cramps. I never realized how many people missed time from work and time from school because they couldn't afford products. And the other thing I will add to what you said is that there's currently a bill pending in the Massachusetts legislature called the IAM bill. It's recently been passed by the House. It's floundering in the Senate. But if the bill passed, it would enable free access to period products in public schools, state prisons, and homeless shelters. In any event, doing all this work, I've really come to appreciate what folks like Hope and Comfort do, the services they provide. And so with this, I want to introduce Abby Mcdonald, who is the Community Engagement Manager.
Come on up, Abby.
Of Hope and Comfort. In a perfect world, Abby would be out of a job.
Yes.
But we don't live in a perfect world, and she does a great job.
Thank you, Deb. So hi, everyone. I'm Abby Mcdonald. I'm the Community Engagement Manager at Hope and Comfort. We work to end hygiene insecurity, which obviously includes period poverty. So in addition to providing hygiene products to our community partners, we obviously provide period products as well. This year, we will distribute 2 million hygiene products. Of that, I would say probably around 200,000 will be period products. We really have been starting to expand into the period product space in the last, I would say, 3 years. We're currently in the third year of a project funded through CJP's The Miriam Fund, where we work with about 60 to 70 young people a month from different organizations throughout Greater Boston. You know, Waltham Boys and Girls Club is a partner. We work with a couple of schools in Boston on this particular project, where young people take a survey each month and they're able to request, you know, specific types of period products that they want. It's really customized, and they're also able to get specific hygiene products along with that too. So, you know, they're able to say, hey, I want half of my month's supply to be regular tampons with an applicator, half of my month's supply to be super pads, you know, this specific brand, everything like that. In addition to just getting a lot of really great data around what the need is in the community, we're also able to get a lot of feedback from the youth around, you know, what is it like when you have to go to school and you don't have access to these products? We hear a lot about young people skipping school, they skip sports practice, they don't go to their after school activities because they don't have something simple like a pad, when, you know, it should be something that they're able to go into right in their bathroom and be able to get it. We hear a lot about young people and the shame associated with having their period. And some of them have even, you know, told us, I don't want to ask my mom for these products. I feel bad. I know that it's going to take away money from another essential need. I know that when I first got my period, the first person that I wanted to tell was my mom, because I knew she was going to be supportive. And just to feel that, in addition, the shame around having your period, feel like it's an additional financial burden for your family, is really the lived reality of a lot of people in our community. Unfortunately, the Greater Boston area is a very privileged area, and, you know, just like Anita was saying, a lot of people don't think that period poverty is something that exists here, but it does in our own community. So just want to say thank you to everyone who brought some pads, brought some tampons tonight. It's really going to go a long way.
Didn't I read that, was it 30% of disadvantaged women? Did I hear that statistic?
Yeah, so I would say about 1 in 5 young people don't have access to period products on a regular basis, which, if you think about it, is insane.
Yeah. That was so shocking to me. I mean, you know.
Yeah, well, and it's, you know, it's an intersectional issue. It's an issue that impacts women of color, people who are poverty in particular, people who live at a distance from stores that they can buy things at. It's also, in some parts of the world, the lack of access to water, clean water, to safe bathrooms, to places to get rid of what you've used afterwards. There's environmental issues. I mean, all of these problems meet in some ways here. And the medical stuff, I mean, one of the things that was most shocking in the book was that women of color and people of color who are treated differently in medical settings than men have a much higher rate of delayed treatment for serious gynecological problems, because they're present with menstrual pain and they're dismissed as just, you know, go home, take some more Advil and rest and you'll be fine. That happens to white women as well, but in particular it happens more and more chronically with women of color.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Since you mentioned that, you say in the book, in a 2016 survey of 220 medical students and residents, as many as half agreed with these statements. I mean, when I was reading this book, I kept underlining, oh my God, you know, and like, blah, 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 you know, it was one thing after another. This is what more than half agreed with. Black people's nerve endings are less sensitive than white people's.
Medical students.
Medical students, these are not, high school dropouts. Black people's skin is thicker than white people's. And thirdly, black people's blood coagulates more quickly than white people's.
So,
You couldn't make this up.
no, and that's one of those examples of why people of color distrust the medical establishment. And I have to say that the medical community, have been, in the past few years, been trying to address this and actually admit it and say head on, we have a lot of work to do, because there are surveys like this that show that. So, and it shows up in people's everyday lives and in people's everyday pain. And so that's part of the world we live in. So it's not a sort of a fringe issue. It's at the middle of a lot of our lives, and the lives of the people we care about. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know you said the United States has, we're big on putting people in jail in this country anyhow, and the privatization of jails, and that's a whole other topic. But they said even though the United States has 5% of the world's female population, it holds more than 30% of the world's incarcerated women. So for the vast majority of women, they must pay themselves for their period products. And I was so shocked. I was so shocked and disgusted by this.
Yeah.
I must have repeated this 3 or 4 times to different people, saying, "Oh, you have to read Anita's book. This is so unsettling."
They're going to go running in another direction. From there. Oh God, not another terrible statistic.
What was I going to say? Oh, many organizations have taken up the cause for menstrual justice and organized collections, such as here at Bethel. What more should be done?
Well, you can write to, I'm sure you can tell us who to write to about the IM bill. You can certainly send a letter to whatever your senator is and say, let's get this done. It would be one of the most far-reaching bills in the country if we passed this, by the way. It's one of the more progressive ones. Please put products out in your home, in your school, in your church, in your synagogue. Make sure they're everywhere. Even if you don't think anybody who ever comes to your house is going to use one, it models this fact that it should just be available, like toilet paper, like soap and water, and somewhere to dry your hands. There's that. You can support organizations like this. There's loads of organizations doing interesting work. And you can tell other people, have you thought about this? I have to say, when I started it, and someone said, what are you working on? I took a deep breath, and especially if they were men, say, I'm not sure you want to hear about this, but here it is. And I very quickly stopped doing that because I realized that was, why am I apologizing for writing about something that's everyday important? So you have to take a deep breath at some point and say, I'm going to talk about this openly, because we don't as a society. It's a punchline, it's a dirty joke in a lot, until women comedians take it on, which I'm a big fan of Michelle Wolf, who is the doyenne of filthy period jokes that are very funny and very, filthy in the best sense.
Okay.
And so, but I actually think we're at a turning point with this. I think we're at an inflection point where people are talking about it, where it's no longer quite the secret, where it's in the news all the time, where there are companies who are giving their employees menstrual leave. You can, if you want, take a day or two at home, if you can work at home, or if you can't come into the factory or whatever, you have some period of time that you can stay home because some of us suffer really a lot during our menstrual cycles, and some people get migraines. Some people have to lie flat for a day. That's not because they're less than anybody. And there also was a recent survey that women self-reported that they were less productive on days where they had to go to work when they really should have stayed home. But they manage. We always manage. make up for it the next day, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Are we opening to?
Question, yeah, I just
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
say one other thing, which I think is so important, that there are, in certain cultures, such as the Native Americans, they have the flower dance. Well, a girl fasts and sings and runs long distances and stops by special paths to rest at sacred pools. And so in certain tribes, there's a resurgence and amendment of these rituals. And then for the Maoris, there's a ritual that connects women back to the original female deities. So, and I think you have in your book, in Judaism, there's like at least 100 prayers you can say a day. And so we want to try to originate some new traditions. And I think you had a meditation for menarche before immersing. I welcome this stage of womanhood with a mixture of emotions. I don't know what the future will bring or how this great change in my body will bring changes to other parts of my life. May I always respect my body and the potential it holds. And I thought, wouldn't that be lovely? And there's an additional one for menopause, etc., but that's another day, another story.
It's another book.
So we want to open this up for questions. We're going to have some questions from people who are on Zoom, and I'm wondering, is there anybody here who has a question? Yes, Emily?
I was just curious to know, since you made a reference that you did a lot of research on the internet, what are your kind of like top 5 go-to platforms for your like go-to information these days? I guess like,
Well, I sort of, it's because I just get this stuff in and I will click on it, and if it's a reputable news source, I'll follow. I mean, there's a lot of just people just posting things, but if it's the Hindu Times in India, I'll read it. Today there was Forbes magazine, there was a piece about it. So it's like, so and when I actually would describe something, I would read one article about some event that happened in India and try to find 2 or 3 other sources to confirm it. So the internet, of course, is dicey that way. And of course, if it's a journal of the American Medical Association, this is the first book I've had to footnote for a long time. So I tried to use the most reputable sources I could. And then there's, I didn't do too much with other platforms. I didn't do too much. There's a lot of really interesting stuff happening on WhatsApp and Twitter of young women sharing stories with each other. Also, some pretty awful stuff as well. But in the past, when if your mother wasn't going to talk to you and you weren't getting any sex ed at school, you were really sort of at the mercy of whoever you could get information from. But there are really good websites now run by mostly women gynecologists who are very friendly and jolly, and they'll answer any question you possibly could have, and they make things very clear and plain. And there are a lot of apps created by girls, by like middle school girls, about how do what's happening to your body in language that they understand. So, I mean, it's overwhelming what's out there. And I think, as in most things, if you're in middle school, you ask a friend and they said, oh, here's a really good website that I found. And if you've got a good enough, and my mother said it's really accurate, and she's a gynecologist, so we can trust her. So you have to be careful, but I cast a very wide net to do the book anyway.
Anyone else have questions? Yes.
do you think there's, I haven't read the book, but I heard another interview with you, and what struck me was the impact on women's and girls' ability to go to school or to play a sport, which helps them advance and get into college. And women who don't have the luxury of working from home, or don't have the luxury of kind of working on their schedule.
Right.
And the impact that has socioeconomically, right? And I wonder if there's
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to repeat the
Yeah,
question
well,
so
we'll
they'll
get to
hear
the-
it in Zoom. Yeah, so you wanted to know
Wait,
what
I
the,
haven't asked a question.
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
all
go
right.
ahead.
But my question is, do you think there's a connection, if you look at what's happening with reproductive health, and, women of color are, the ones who are suffering from that perspective also, from a healthcare perspective, that, you know, it is interconnected. So I think it's amazing that these young girls are doing this, and this is part of like maybe their first step in social justice. But do you think there's any reason to kind of combine it, or I think obviously there's some connection?
Yeah, well, I think the question is, I kind of think the question is about the attack on reproductive justice and on women's abilities to control their lives and how that might connect with this. I think misogyny is the through line here, not trusting women about, you know, taking care of their own bodies, not empowering women to make choices about their own bodies. I think if you're a 13-year-old, I think we're not letting them make, yeah, preventing you from making them, making it harder for you to make choices for yourself, ignoring the needs of young girls and of people who don't have means, and, you know, and taking advantage of people who don't have any power. Homelessness, is another thing. To be homeless and be menstruating. They are connected. It's misogyny. It's distrust of the body that bleeds. It's distrust of women's bodies. And making the connection, I think that's something that happens as you get a little bit older as well. I mean, some of those 13-year-old girls, believe me, know all about reproductive justice and the attack on abortion, but not all of them do. I think people come to these things at different times. But hopefully, if we can talk to each other with respect about these things, and with youngsters in particular, take them where they're at. And sometimes they teach their parents too about pride and getting rid of stigma and shame as well. So it's all connected, and we have many battles on many fronts to fight at this point.
Indeed. We just want to take one from the Zoom people.
Yes, Maxine asked, do you feel that the same difficulties exist for older women with bladder insufficiencies and might need similar products?
Yes. Absolutely, absolutely. What's interesting with products, also there's a chapter about products in here. I think part of it has to do with women in being in business and also having money and investing in things. But the product choices are much bigger than they were in the past. And period underwear, for example, and bladder insufficiency underwear are in the same universe as each other. They tend to be advertised very separately, but clearly there's this sense that there should be enough products to take care of people's needs with comfort and dignity, and they are connected. And again, women's shame around bladder insufficiency is not so far away from menstrual shame as well. So luckily men also have this, yes, they do too.
There are so many medical device companies coming up with, I know offhand of like a dozen companies trying to create devices and other products for urinary incontinence or other bladder issues.
Right. And they're advertised on television, which is another thing that would have never happened a few years ago. And the period products also are being advertised on television in a way in the past that they didn't, without smirking and without quite so many wink wink allusions. So and I think that's the fact that women are consumers. We've always been consumers, but at this point we're demanding that all of our needs get met. And there are women also who are making these products too, especially period products. There are lots of companies around the world started by young women who think that the product industry has not been sufficiently responsive to women's needs, and also in terms of environmental impact of disposables as well. So yeah, I agree. We all agree.
One more from the audience. Yes, Lee?
So there's one barrier for girls in school. Even girls who have access to products, even girls who come from better communities or whatever, a lot of money, have products with them, stay home from school because they have to ask the teacher if they can go to the bathroom.
Yep.
And the teacher, in a lot of cases, teachers are really hostile. There is that trait, misogyny, of not trusting the girls. On the other hand, there are the girls, speaking as a former teacher, there are the girls who are going to they're just not going to come back.
Right.
They're just going to wander around, smoke behind the bathroom, whatever. But girls will stay home from school rather than
Ask.
have to ask a male teacher or a female teacher even, and have to kind of grovel. You have to grovel, you have to get a hall pass, you have to, why do you need to go? And they're even if you put product in the bathrooms for them, which is certainly a good step up from sending them to the nurse's office for them, which is what used to happen. Even if the product is there, how do you address the mindset of the teachers who control whether or not you get to go to the bathroom and take it back?
I also want to say that, you know, who pays for those products? The nurses do. There's never been, in most schools, there's no budget for this. So the school nurse usually buys them. And again, why should you're not sick. You shouldn't have to go to the nurse to get to get something. You know, I think, I watched this again from my Zoom feed. There was a very high-end school in California, and there was, talk about product placement, there was this giant screen in the front hall, which was talking about what the events that were going on. And it also said, all the bathrooms have period products. I mean, it was like right out there for everyone to see. So by talking about it, by making it public, certainly there should be some memo to go to the teachers, and perhaps there needs to be health education for teachers as well. There's a great woman, I quoted a piece a woman wrote from her parochial school where, you know, the male teacher sort of humiliated her. She stood up and there was blood on the seat, and he, you know, she left the room, and I don't think she ever went back, but, you know, she taught him something about how to treat people in this regard. And so, you know, there's a lot of work to do, but I really think putting products in the bathrooms, putting signs up around the building that say, you know, don't worry, we've got you, you know, we have what you need in the bathroom. Well, you know, the more we make it public, the less those teachers can behave that way. It's going to take again, misogyny is very deeply ingrained, and we're not going to get rid of it in the next 10 years anywhere. But I really think these kids who refuse to be ashamed are also role models for one another. I think you're absolutely right, and any barrier is not a good, is too many barriers. So
I think we have a question from Zoom from Donna Silverman.
Yes.
Donna Silverman.
Hi, thank you, Margie. Your presentation is very illuminating, Anita. Thank you so much. And I want to dovetail your remark regarding Black girls having less access to period products. There was a study done in 2017 by Georgetown University using a sample of over 300 adults of diverse ethnic and educational backgrounds, comparing white girls to Black girls in terms of their needs for comfort. And overwhelmingly, the results of the study indicated that Black girls were perceived as more adult-like, less innocent, more sexually mature from white girls, and less in need of comfort.
yep, I've read that. I also, one of the things that was really
Thank you, Donna.
It was interesting was reading about and talking to Black women gynecologists, and reading articles by young Black women about the culture in the Black community about shame, and that being clean in this culture has tremendous high value if you're Black, because you're seen as dirty by the white community. So any kind of stain on you has even more of a kind of a horror attached to it. So there's a lot of silence around it as well, which is being, again, led by some really wonderful physicians, Black women physicians, and girls writing in their own magazines and online about their experiences, and talking to their friends, talking to their mothers. There's a great quote from this one gynecologist that I love, the when a grandmother and a mother and a daughter are all coming to see me, she sees adolescents mostly, because she knows she needs to have a conversation, an education conversation with all of them together. And the amount of relief among the family is profound. And it lets the air out of a lot of the shame. There's, yeah. Thank you. That was
There's
a good
hope.
one.
I think
Yeah,
we have
one more.
one more from the audience here. Yes, go ahead, Judith.
Actually, not a question, but a comment. I read the book, and if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. I spent 10 years in OBGYN, a long time ago. And there were things in there that stunned me true. And so one that was so horrific that I wanted you to just say a word or two about it. Women who were working in a factory, I assume in India.
Yeah, it was Sri Lanka, I think.
In Sri Lanka. Not only didn't have access to product, couldn't leave the factory floor, and they would literally sweep up the fabric and dust remnants that collected in the corners. That's what they used. So they were, of course, at high risk for infection. Now, to balance that off, and maybe say a word or two about that, my very favorite quote in the book was these young teenagers who went to school wearing T-shirts that said, anything you can do, I can do with you.
Yeah, I remember, yeah, that was.
Some people don't like that, but I think it's great.
I think it's great.
The women in Sri Lanka, I just want to say there was a sort of a community organization and run by a very high-powered woman who actually went to the factory owners and proved to them that they were, and women would stay home also. People would lose work time, they would get sick, they would stay home, then you'd have to train new people. So they made the case that, providing products and bathroom time would save them money because their best workers could continue to work, wouldn't lose time, wouldn't get sick. And they made some progress in some of the factories as a result of making the financial argument for themselves. So there are people working on their own behalf in all corners of the world around this. This is an organization that works with women on all sorts of childcare, and these factory jobs are highly sought after because it's one of the few ways women who have very little education can really make enough of a living to support their families, send their kids to school. So yeah, I think.
All right, one last question, and then we'll break for a nosh.
Yeah, we got food. We got food. All right.
This isn't so much a question. I'll preface this by saying I'm a midwife and I primarily take care of patients who are trans and oversee their hormone therapy and GYN care. So this is worlds that I know very well. But also having period products in every bathroom.
Every bathroom.
Not just girls' bathrooms. Yep. And I think that that's a huge thing that gets missed. All of my patients bleed.
Right, and I want to say that on college campuses, this is a hot topic because it's not such a hot topic to put them in the girls' bathrooms or all people bathrooms, but to also put them in the boys' bathrooms, and that often gets kind of pushback. But then people get used to it. We are living in a time when it's less threatening than it used to be because we're talking about it more and it's out there more. But absolutely. So there are colleges where there was a big fight around that in particular. So, and again, college students are perfectly comfortable, or the ones who are doing this work are really comfortable with the full range of who bleeds. So absolutely, that's great. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, if anyone would like a book by Anita.
We only have a few.
We only have a few,
yeah,
and you have to pay cash, or they could write a check to you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't usually sell them, but I thought I brought a few. I would bring.
Yeah. All
Okay.
right. So thank you very much.
Thank you very
Anita.
much. What a good interview. That was great.
And thank you, Barbara Miller, Deb Oppenheimer, and
Everybody
my
out in
husband.
Zoom land, thank you for
Yes,
coming.
thank you for coming, everyone. This has been
It's fun.
fun. Yeah, it's been a